when we incorporate our traditional foods, that's full nourishment. In my opinion, we feel the most spiritually and emotionally happy is when we can eat the foods that are important to us.
Hey everyone, welcome to Food Culture Curious. I am your host, Arely Gutierrez. As a first gen Mexican American, and especially now working in healthcare as a dietitian, I have seen firsthand how a lack of cultural inclusion can negatively impact our patients. And I want to help change that. So I started Food Culture Curious to have impactful conversations with healthcare professionals of different cultures and backgrounds to get their insight on how to be more culturally inclusive in our nutrition recommendations. Let's continue this journey together with today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to Food Culture Curious. My name is Arely. I'm a registered dietitian on a mission to help healthcare professionals be more culturally inclusive in their nutrition recommendations. Today we have with us Kealohi Naipo. She is a bilingual Native Hawaiian registered dietitian and owner of Naipo Nutrition in Hawaii. She understands many of the food, nutrition, and cultural body image struggles in Hawaii and founded her business with the hopes of bridging the gap for her community in these areas. Her specialty is providing nutrition therapy for chronic conditions and eating disorders through a weight-inclusive, non-diet, anti-colonial approach to help clients become attuned eaters and enjoy their cultural foods without shame. Welcome, Kealohi.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, you are everything that I want to learn about and that I want to help others learn about. When I saw your profile, I was like, yes, culture inclusion. I love it. I want to learn more about it.
Cool.
Tell me a little bit about the path to RD and how you realized that you needed to bring this cultural inclusivity piece to that.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So I did my undergraduate in Oregon at Oregon State University. So it was a pretty straightforward undergrad dietetic program. And then I ended up moving home to Hawaii shortly after I graduated. And I've done lots of work in the community in various roles that are like food and nutrition related. And as I was doing my nutrition internship, you could just notice the lack of some of the culturally tailored advice that we might give around food or just like understanding about like nutrient profiles of certain foods and how to help people tailor their diets without excluding the foods that they grew up on or that were meaningful for them because of their culture and their families and etc. So I've made it my goal and my mission to try to include more of that and bridge the gap by having the training that we do as dietitians in this very Western system, while also including some of the indigenous and traditional practices and that knowledge that we have about food to our clients, doing both.
Yeah, I love that. And this is a perfect opportunity with hopefully whoever's listening to learn more about the Hawaiian food culture. So, can you give us
Yeah.
a little crash course? What are some main staples as far as your protein?
Yeah, this is a great question. So our family grew up near the ocean. So I was very fortunate. My dad was a fisherman in his free time. So we grew up with a lot of fish and then a lot of the traditional proteins like turkey and chicken and pork and things like that. Because of our mixed, I call it like a local cuisine that we have here in Hawaii, which is an influence from many different cultures. We can talk about that later, but I also grew up with many canned products like Spam and those different like sausages and things like that. I don't know if you grew up with that as well, but that was definitely more accessible to our families at a certain point as far as proteins.
Yes. I don't know if you've been to Disney World, but they in Epcot, they were having musabi.
Oh, musubi. Yeah.
Musabi.
Musubi? Yeah.
Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
and it has spam, right?
It has spam.
So I
Yeah.
was like, this is such a delicious combination and a great idea for spam.
Yeah. Our local cuisine culture is an influence of many different cultures from, and I think stems from like the plantation era, the sugar plantation era, when many people moved to Hawaii to work in the plantation field. So you'll see this hybrid of many different types of foods. The musubi is like modeled after the Japanese sushi,
Yeah.
but accessible span, right? So there's all these different like influences on the foods and meals here in Hawaii. So it's just this really beautiful melting pot of cultures and cuisines.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah.
let's round it out a little bit more. Tell us about the starches that are really prominent over there.
So I grew up with a lot of white rice. I have like very fond memories. My grandmother is Okinawan, so she would make us fried rice. I remember that, and musubis while she was with us. And then we also eat traditionally a lot of like starchy vegetables. So things like taro grows really abundantly here in Hawaii, and then other starchy vegetables like breadfruit, which is really accessible to us as well. So breadfruit, we had a tree at our house, so we would cook that. And then all of your other like regular starches like breads and pastas sprinkled throughout.
And you mentioned the starchy vegetables. What are some other produce that are very popular over there?
Yeah, so it's a very tropical climate. So a lot of tropical fruits and plants and vegetables grow really well in Hawaii. So you'll see a lot of papaya, you'll see bananas. Many of the citruses grow really well here in Hawaii. Of course, there's coconut and avocado. Traditionally, those weren't plants of our ancestors, but things that were brought over, but grow really well in this climate. So things that are more traditional are things like taro and breadfruit, sweet potato, a lot of what we call voyaging crops that were easy to transport on the canoes throughout the Pacifica because our ancestors used to sail from places. Those are things that they would bring with them. Coconut and even seaweed, they would harvest seaweed from the ocean and mix that into things. So lots of different types of.
I love how one of the influences of the types of food we have is what carries well, right? Like you mentioned, if we're
Mhm.
traveling, then we have to think about what's going to sustain us for a long period of time and how that's a factor.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, they were
awesome.
so smart in that way, right? To think about these really like nutrient dense foods that store well, but then also like coconut water and using coconut for long distances and traveling. So I thought that it's just neat to nerd out on those kind of things.
No, yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Is there something more you can tell us as far as what you were mentioning earlier with the melting pot of the different cuisines? So you mentioned Japanese. Is there any other cultures that are very prominent and that their food cultures are prominent there in Hawaii?
Yeah, so many. So with the plantation era in the 1800s, individuals from like Puerto Rico, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, I'm sure I'm missing some, but Thai, just like many workers came over to work in the plantation era. And so they communed together, they shared meals together, they made meals together. So there's a lot of that hybrid on the types of cuisines that are available now and then also intermarried, right? So a lot of us here in Hawaii are interracial individuals. Like myself, my maternal grandmother is Okinawan, as I mentioned, and my paternal grandmother is Caucasian, and both of my grandfathers were part Hawaiian. So they were Native Hawaiian. One was like Chinese German, and the other one was Caucasian. So there's a lot of mix between a lot of individuals, which also makes talking about food a lot more interesting because you're trying to figure out what is meaningful to people when you talk about food and nutrition.
And that's something I try to explain to healthcare providers or people in general is that no culture is a monolith. You can have a million Mexicans and they're all going to eat different things depending on the region or who they
Mhm.
married or what religion they are. Like there's so many different factors that affect our food culture.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Right now that we're entering into the holiday season, I'd love to talk a little bit about the food culture or the Hawaiian food culture and holidays. What holidays in your family do you celebrate, and what foods do you see around these holidays?
Oh, that's a great question. Around the holidays, we most recently celebrated Ko'a, which is an Independence Day for Hawaii. So most Hawaiians celebrate regularly around that time with a lot of our traditional food. So some people will make an imu, which is underground, like a hole in the ground with rocks. So you put foods in there and you cover it up. So we'll make things like lau lau, which is like we use the taro leaves, the tops of the taro plant, and we'll wrap foods in it. So sometimes it'll have like pork, chicken. Other times we'll put like starchy vegetables, and that can be wrapped individually or in pans and put into the ground. We'll cook a lot of our traditional plant-based starches. So sweet potato or breadfruit also goes into the ground. And then just modernly, I think with more contemporary access to foods, just experimenting with other things like how to cook a brisket in an
Yeah.
emu or like how to make oxtail in an emu. So there's so much variety. And so over the holidays, we see that influence like our traditional foods more present on the table. And then also a variety of just like contemporary foods. I grew up with my grandma making a roast around Christmas time, or she would want to make what she would call chiopino, which was like a seafood a stew that she would make. So there's so many different influences, and I think it'll probably differ with the different families that you talk to here in Hawaii.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That's what I tell my guests I want to hear about your particular family because I understand it's going to be completely different from even the family just down the street.
totally. Yeah.
Wonderful. Do you celebrate Christmas or any other holidays around this time?
Yeah, most of us do. We all, when the missionaries came over, many Hawaiians converted to Christianity or other types of religion. So we celebrate Christmas in our families. So we end up going to Christmas Mass, I think this year, it's the day before. So Christmas Eve Mass and celebrate at church. And then we'll usually gather with family. To us, it's just time to be together with family and loved ones. I think that the emphasis. And then some folks will practice religious beliefs at that time. But for us, it's being together with your family and just practicing a lot of gratitude for what we have.
That's wonderful. So, one thing we haven't touched on yet, and I would love to talk about is any sweets or desserts, either related to the holidays or not. What are some popular staples over there?
Oh, yeah. So coconut grows easily here in Hawaii. So we have a lot of desserts. I think they're more contemporary type dishes, but haupia is one dish that is, to me, reminds me of a Hawaii dish. So it's like almost likened to a custard or like a pudding with coconut milk, and then there's sugar and it mixed together and like a little custard. It's really delicious. Another dessert is kulolo. So it's that cooked taro root and it's shaved or grated. And you mix that with coconut milk and a little bit of sugar. And that's baked in an oven. It comes out like have you ever had mochi? It's like
Mhm.
a,
It's
like
kind of
sticky
chewy.
sort of chewy type texture. Yeah. So that's something that we grew up with. And then something that reminds me of the holidays is my grandma. She used to bake when she was alive. And so she would make what she called these like evil chocolate cookies, which was like unsweetened cocoa. She'd melt that down and make a cookie batter out of it. And she just loved dark chocolate. So she passed away in her 90s. So she'd make that every Christmas. And that's what we do in honor of her memory in our family.
I love that. And I love her too. I
Too. There's
agree
no
with
other
her
way to do
there.
it.
I know.
Yeah. She's sore by it. She's like that and my red wine. I was like, okay, shoot, grandma, you can have whatever you want. Like,
Yeah, she was onto something.
she was, right? My gosh. Yeah.
Perfect. One last little bit I want to go over as far as the food culture side. Can you tell us a little bit about any spices or seasonings that are common?
Oh, yeah. So traditionally, we use a lot of sea salt. So Hawaiians would gather sea salt by the shoreline because we live coastal. So you can gather sea salt, and that's traditionally what's used to season foods, not anything really fancy here. I think over time, with the plantation influence and more food items, what we grew up with a lot are like a lot of aromatics, which have an Asian influence, in my opinion. So a lot of green onions, garlic and onion are very popular as part of cooking here in Hawaii. Those are like the staples that we use in a lot of our cooking. And then more recently, some more aromatics like rosemary and herbs and those type of things. But a lot of our cooking kind of starts with that onion, garlic, and even like a green onion base to it.
Awesome. We definitely use a lot of onion and garlic in Mexican cooking. And then on the sweeter side, it sounds like you use a lot of coconut and those types of tropical fruits, things like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So, with any of these foods, do you ever find that there's any cultural health beliefs that surround them? If someone isn't feeling well or they're in a certain stage of their life, are there certain foods that have these like healing beliefs behind them?
Yeah, so there's a lot of wisdom, I think, in our traditional foods. And there are people who study traditional medicine using our plants, herbs, and things like that. So there are different remedies that we use for things like high blood pressure or just overall wellness, or if you're feeling like you're catching colds, like there are different teas that we've been taught to prepare using plants that are native and grow in Hawaii. And I think the one thing that is really meaningful to me and I like to share with folks is that just the intention of the way that we cook. So we were taught when we were growing up and working in the kitchen that it's all about your intention during your cooking. If you're speaking negatively or having bad energy around your meals, that goes into the food that you make and it's going to have a negative outcome. It's going to taste bad. So we were always taught we had to say good things and speak good things around cooking and around the meal for those reasons, because we believe in a lot of energy and that's transferred to individuals. And we would especially be mindful about that when we had something called poi as a staple also in our traditional diet. So it's a taro that's mashed up and it's mixed with water. And the history of taro in our stories is that this is our oldest brother, our eldest relative. So Hawaiians have a very deep tie to the land for this reason, because we quite literally see them as our relatives. So anytime the poi was present or kalo was present, then you were especially supposed to be speaking good things around the dinner table, right? Because it'd be like talking badly in front of a relative. So we're very mindful of that too.
I love
But
that. That's
yeah.
awesome. And we see that even when people are studying the way you talk to plants, or even
Mhm.
just your energy around plants and how that affects the plants, it would make sense that your energy around food would affect the food.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Mhm.
And I completely agree with what you say. A lot of it, even if we can't say it's evidence based, it's still a wisdom that was passed down. And to some extent, we don't know why it's working. We just know that it works. So we
Yeah,
continue to do it and pass it on to the next generation.
I agree.
Mm,
I agree. Sometimes the science has to catch up. So
yes, exactly. Perfect. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'd love to talk a little bit more about you and what you're doing in your nutrition practice. So tell me a little bit about the populations you like to focus on and how you help them use their cultural foods to meet their goals.
oh, yeah. So right now, I work with mostly women, and I take anywhere from individuals who are just looking to improve their chronic health conditions to individuals who are needing support with their eating disorder to like healing and recovery from the eating disorder. And I practice from a weight inclusive lens so that we try not to make weight the main focus, but what are the variables and the behaviors that we can focus on to help improve blood sugars or high cholesterol, high blood pressure, whatever the case might be. And many folks in Hawaii eat they're in some form their traditional food. So it's never omitted from the conversation. I think it's just helping them understand, okay, what are the types of nutrients in these foods? If you like ramen, what's the nutrients in ramen? And if you need to make it more balanced, say for your blood sugars, how can we help you support that? Okay, we're going to find foods that have protein in there. We have foods fiber. Let's figure out how to get more of that. So I don't think it's ever not a part of the conversation about meeting the clients where they're at and figuring out what can we add into their meal. So we do that through one-on-one counseling. Most of my clients are individual. And then I'm thinking about slowly branching out maybe into counseling in 2025, because I think there's a lot of value in having those conversations with other people other than like a provider type figure. There's a lot more validation when supported, I think, in that way.
And having that shared experience.
Yeah, for sure. That they're not the only ones, whatever the case might be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that including their cultural foods is a given. I feel like one of the things that my population struggles with, or like the Mexican American population, is that they get told that Mexican food isn't healthy, right? So
Mhm.
that they're told to stay away from their own cultural foods. And I'd speak particularly about the kidney space. There's a lot of different Mexican foods that get like stigmatized. So I always wonder if that's a barrier that other populations face? Is that are they hearing from their providers that this food is bad?
I think so. I think like many other spaces, like the Mediterranean diet is like the gold standard, like ideal diet that I hear is getting shared with our community. And if you look at that diet, it doesn't necessarily include any foods that are meaningful to us here in Hawaii. So they do hear that message to answer your question. And I think it is encouraging when I talk with them is, we can find those nutrients in the foods that are here in Hawaii. The food items are just going to look differently, but you're still going to find those complex carbohydrates. You're going to find fruits. You're going to find lean protein options. That's the premise of Mediterranean diet, but we're just adapting it for our people and what is important and what they have access to, because some of those things are really expensive. And Hawaii, the cost of food is most places really expensive. Trying to meet them where they're at, I think is a really important part of nutrition.
So you mentioned this one particular bear because we all have different bears, but it sounds like in Hawaii, one of the major barriers seems to be food costs because I'm assuming you have to
Mhm.
import a lot of things in.
I would say food cost is a really big one right now. Like 90 to 95% of our food is imported to the islands. So it's very expensive. We have spaces where we still have food insecurity in certain spaces, lack of access to grocery stores, and then in certain spaces, no more grocery stores. So it's just people are traveling pretty far. That's a big barrier for us. Also, the cost of living is really expensive here in Hawaii just to live. So many people don't have a lot of time. They're working, long hours to supplement their income. Maybe they're working two jobs to stay here in Hawaii. Also, something that's important to us is taking care of our elders, taking care of our babies. So a lot of people are either watching their children or taking care of elders along with working. I think that's been like a big barrier is like how to make time to prepare healthy meals because people have this idea that everything has to be made from scratch or it needs to be prepared at home to be quote unquote healthy. Yeah, I would add those two to the list.
Wonderful. I know you're doing a lot to help everyone that's coming to you for advice. Do you happen to have a particular success story about maybe any cultural food myths you helped someone dispel or how you were able to help them meet their goals while still including their cultural foods?
Yeah, I love having the conversation about the Mediterranean diet with my clients because they think that their impression of what health and nutrition has to look like. They have to eat my salmon and my broccoli, and that where I'm supposed that's how I'm supposed to model nutrition in my routine. I don't have a specific example to share, but I think that's always fun to talk with them about how to adapt some of those principles in the diet and to incorporate their foods that are meaningful and important to them. I've had a lot of success with mostly right now many diabetics. I've been seeing more diabetics, so helping them to modify their carbohydrate intake using different types of foods while also still incorporating their cultural foods has been a lot of fun. And that's super rewarding to see them physically notice the changes, but also like mentally and spiritually still fulfilled. Because I think when we incorporate our traditional foods, that's full nourishment. In my opinion, we feel the most spiritually and emotionally happy is when we can eat the foods that are important to us. So that's always a nice outcome.
I know you blow their minds when you tell them things like, yes, you can have rice. Yes, you can have X, Y, or Z. And also reminding them that food is so much more than just the nutrients and the calories. It's memories, it's emotions. There's so much more to it. And just neglecting that makes a big impact on someone's health, anyways, their
Yeah.
emotional health and put stress on them. So we can help relieve that. And that's like a superpower that we have.
Yeah, I like to tell them these parts of our self don't exist in silos, right? Our mental health is not separate from our physical, which is not separate from our spiritual. And in some ways, certain things affect all parts of us, right? But yeah, it feels like a superpower at times. And it's very strange because it shouldn't be. but but yeah, to your point, they are definitely relieved when they can incorporate things that make them happy.
Love that. I really appreciate you spending the time to give us a little crash course on the Hawaiian food culture and particularly how you and your family eat and what you're doing to help the population. If people want to work with you, how can they find you?
So I'm most active on Instagram right now. I think that's all my millennial brain can handle. But my handle is at the dot Hawaiian dot dietitian. So you can find me there and follow along for what's happening.
Perfect. Thank you again so much. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time. If you are interested in supporting this podcast, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/foodculturecurious. Or as always, you can support by sharing, following, or rating this podcast. Every click from y'all means the world to me. And now for a quick disclaimer. Food Culture Curious is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not take the place of medical advice from licensed healthcare professionals. If you need to seek medical advice, please speak to your healthcare provider. Thank you for listening.